Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Tom Christie at d20play, and we have our guest of honor with us, Kelsey. Kelsey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Also joining me, we got John Jones.
Hello.
John's got a game to go run in about an hour. He's going to go run a Savage Worlds game. And then Kelsey, we got lots of questions for you. Why don't we start out with, what is the origin story for you and your gaming?
Yeah, gosh, I'm really lucky that I got exposed to D&D kind of when I was a lot younger. I was in middle school or late grade school. And I'm from southern Wisconsin, so that was like D&D was really healthy and strong in that part of the world, even when TSR was having its struggles and its sort of like end of life cycle. So so my friends invited me to play, and that there's a really strong like local gaming store culture in the Madison area, which is where I grew up, and tons of places. And so we started going to the local game store. My mom got her hands on like a box set copy of D&D that she borrowed from a friend, the librarian friend, whose son had a bunch of D&D products. So that's, my mom was like, hey, I think you would like this. I know what kind of books you like. And so I started up with second edition AD&D, and I didn't, like THACO was the first time I had ever seen like negative number calculation before. I was totally baffled. So thankfully, third edition came out not too long after that. And so some really wonderful people were running games at the local game store, including James Mishler, who's this fantastic, like he's like the steward of the Wilderlands. Like there's nobody who knows more about the Wilderlands of high fantasy than him. He's worked with Bob Bloodsaw, the elder. And so I just had these wonderful people running games and keeping the gaming culture like healthy and fun, and have been doing it ever since.
So you went away from gaming for a little bit, right? And then came back. I think that's what I heard.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
I first heard about you when the whole OGL debacle kind of dropped. And I was looking at, different websites, and I saw yours. And that's when I first heard about ShadowDark, how you're working on that. So tell us about how ShadowDark evolved and finally released.
Yeah, it was a mixture of me having written for 5th edition. I came back to D&D sort of around the end of 4th edition. I left playing the game regularly during the end stage of 4th edition, partly because of my job, and I moved out of the country, and I just didn't really have a group to play with. So I came back at the beginning of 5th edition and started wanting to write content for the game. And that blossomed into what is now my publishing company. But during the last 4 or 5 years, I had been spending a lot of time reflecting on what I loved about those early games that we played in the city state, and how the feel of it was just very different from the kind of material that I was used to publishing and writing for 5th edition. And it turned into this like long journey back through the history of D&D for me, and studying the classic systems again, and thinking like, wow, I really wish I could bring a lot of these design elements back into the 5th edition experience. I started hacking 5th edition, and I got to the conclusion where I'm like, you can't make 5th edition do this. You have to start from scratch. So, which, I mean, that's not entirely fair, because I really do think you can play any edition in the old school style. It's like more of a vibe, but I just wanted to make something custom that would emphasize those particular qualities while keeping a lot of the the streamlining that modern game design has come to. Like, as the blogosphere, the design community, like there's become a strong consensus on things that make a game run more smoothly versus not, or how you achieve a certain feel with these mechanics versus not. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could write an old school style game that embraced those 50 years of streamlining and thought leaders and enormous amounts of playtesting that we've all put the game through at this point. So that's where ShadowDark came from. Yeah.
So we got lots of questions here, John. You want to throw one in, and I'll pull one from the chat?
Well, I think that one of the things that really strikes me about ShadowDark is that you're clearly coming to it with not just an affinity for the older style games and stuff like that, but a real point of view about where tension comes from and how you want to put it into the game and stuff like that. I mean, I think I think that's one of the things that makes ShadowDark stand out from a lot of the other OSR stuff, is that your focus on time and light and stuff like that is really thematic and really tight. Can you talk about where that comes from in your experience?
Yeah, thank you. That's really high praise. Yeah, like so time-based pressure is something that I didn't immediately connect into games. It's funny because during actually when I mentioned earlier briefly that I moved overseas, I went overseas to become an English language teacher. And so I have like not a degree but a certificate in language instruction, and they put you through this crash course about teaching techniques and all this, and you teaching live. And one of the things that we focused on was how time pressure can get people to act. Like when somebody's learning a language and they're practicing fluency, it's really important for them to be speaking sort of extemporaneously and not planning what they're saying, because the skill of speaking requires you to do that fluidly. And so one technique we used was with students, we would time them. We would have a timer out and we would time them during practice, like conversational practice. And that really got them to just take action rather than, fester on the verbs they were trying to conjugate. And I realized after the fact that there was so many similarities between leading a classroom and dungeon mastering. And I started to realize you can pull some of these techniques from teaching over into the game to apply time pressure to encourage action. And the real-time element of timers, it was like this revelatory moment. I remember I was eating corn on the cob at the dinner table. I was like sitting there chomping on corn on the cob, musing about this. And it all came together, and I was like, wait a minute, we can use real time. We can base the game around real time to encourage, stop people from going into the book, like having arguments about what to do for 20 minutes, just encourage action. And that's where that really came from.
And I really saw that when we did, our run through the Scarlet Minotaur. There was room where people are like, I'm going to search over here, I'm going to search over there. And one of the players is like, we got to go, guys. We can't just stay here this whole time. And so it makes the game different. It's really neat. Okay,
Cool.
Someone online here. So we got Charlie McDowell. He says, how many sessions would you expect characters to go from level 1 to the mid to high levels? And how do you handle the replacements there? And also, how fragile are high level characters?
Oh, great questions. So I remember going on like this very lengthy series of calculations and averages when I was figuring out how the experience point system would work. And I remember trying to plan it out where if somebody played a weekly session and got an average amount of treasure, and then also who was spending an average amount of gold on the optional XP systems in the game, like carousing, it would take them about a year to take a character from 1st level through 10th level.
Got it.
And so, that's obviously that can change enormously based on how the game master decides to award XP and all that. But I wanted it to not be something that was too swift, given the averages. So that's so about a year. And then, so I mean, what is that every week? So what, 56? How many weeks are in a year again? 56.
52 weeks.
So 56, like 3-ish hour sessions with average treasure. And then how fragile are high level characters? By the time they're reaching 10th level in the game, they're not fragile anymore. Like they've earned their heroism. Certainly a dragon can still take them out in one round if they're not careful, but they have a lot of ways to respond to that problem and bounce back from that problem. But if you have a character who dies, regardless of their level, handling replacements is kind of up to the GM. I personally run more open table style games. So when I have someone come in with a new character, I usually bring them in at level 1 if they died, because they're going to level up very quickly. If like a level 1 character is running around with a bunch of level 4 or 5 people, the level 1 person is going to catch up quickly because the XP needs they have are much lower.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, there's a ton of other ways. Like you could bring them in at 1 or 2 levels lower than the rest of the group if you were worried about them being like very fragile or very unable to contribute or something. So yeah.
Another one we got here from Scott Dottie. What's the unique monsters in ShadowDark, and what are you looking to develop in the future?
Yeah. Oh, that's a fun question. Thank you, Scott. So the main core book has a lot of sort of the SRD monsters because I wanted to give people the ability to easily translate a lot of adventures over to Shadowdark. But there are a few. There are like 4 or 5 named monsters in there. They're kind of the legendary monsters, and they usually take up a full page. And some of them include Mordanticus, who's a sort of a lich type figure, and he's a character that hopefully gives you a little bit of a little bit of a description about who or what he's after and what he does, but I want it to be a little vague because I want people to be able to incorporate him and others into their campaign settings. But there's him, he's like a high level lich. There's Obix of Azaroom. She's a character who explains an origin of something I've written about in my adventures for a while. The Azaroomian Empire. It's like undead people. And man, there are a few others. There's I'm trying to think of who else. There in the core book itself, there are some like the Wandering Merchant is a character who just shows up. He's actually has an entry on all of the random encounter tables. And he's this sort of cosmic merchant who can show up in a time of possibly great need, who knows. And the explanation for where he comes from and why he exists is a little vague, but again, it's to make it easier to incorporate him into the game world. So I would love to see people write adventures about them. You can, they're totally open as a part of the license. You can write about them, you can explore their history, you can expand on their history if you want to. So that's, to me, that would be really fun to see.
All right. Cool. John, jump in here anytime if you have a question on your own.
Well, okay. So like right now with 5e going through their process of revising and Paizo is revising and all this huge explosion of OGL stuff as a reaction to the thing in January. Are there rules or elements that you're seeing in other people's games that you think are brilliant and cool and you want to find a way to adapt or bring in?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are elements, especially in sort of the more recent, more light systems that I admire so much and I've thought about dabbling with, as like an optional rule maybe in Shadowdark. Yeah. Like one I really like that I've found to be a lot of fun is Cairn totally removes the need to roll to hit and instead replaces that with automatic damage that's reduced by an armor value. And I think that's really cool. I actually got to play a fair bit of Cairn about a month ago, and I remember thinking like, wow, combat's actually very fast and very scary because, you can't avoid the damage. So you have to think differently about how you're approaching combats. And so I think that would be a cool thing to maybe experiment with. I've seen some people experimenting with a little bit of a classless take on Shadowdark, a lot like Nave does, which I thought was fascinating. I think it would be really interesting to try that and to have a list of random advancement for your character like Shadowdark does, but then to see your character becoming a specialist kind of off on their own because of the advancement that you're getting. I just think that would be a really cool thought experiment to see how that worked with the game. So I would love to try that out.
That brings up a real interesting part about Shadowdark is how the advancement's like a random table, which really makes it so it's not character build central. It's more how do you exploit the character you end up with, which is a form of play I really enjoy. Some players like being able to build their character out and such like that. Do you have any ideas for optional rules in that regard?
Sure. I think honestly, if someone wants to build their character and plan it out more, which is what this was designed to prevent.
Right.
However, if someone wants to, that was really the problem it was trying to solve, but it's not really a problem per se. It's more just a style. But you could just choose the talent that you want. Or, I think maybe the GM could allocate, like you can choose each talent up to once, or you can choose the fringe talents once and then the others a certain number of times maybe, but really just getting to pick from the list would probably solve that.
Yeah.
And, some of the fringe talents like on the 12 and the 2 spot are usually something really a little bit more powerful. So the game master might want to figure out how to curtail someone choosing that every single time, but otherwise letting people choose, I would fix that. Yeah.
We got a comment from Ed in the end here. It's rejuvenated my interest in dungeoneering. And I have the same Same feeling about having played some games, Ed. It is, and the adventures you've written, Kelsey, are really good. You know, it's like it's a I like adventures that are locations. There's NPCs. The NPCs have goals, and the party can exploit the NPCs who are working against each other. And each of the
Thank
adventures
you.
I've run so far are like that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There was a
Certainly.
thing that the fourth edition brought a sort of style where each encounter got its own map and they weren't connected to each other and stuff like that. And this really takes you back to a place where there's huge consequences to letting somebody run away or letting one battle wander into another encounter area and stuff like that. And that's, again, just more the tactics and the danger and stuff like that is really fun.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping it would convey. I feel like exactly, John, what you said was that something about fourth edition made every moment in it feel disconnected from the last one to me. And I played an enormous amount of fourth edition. I really gave it a college try, and I didn't end up loving it. I loved my players in the groups that I was playing with, but that was one of my big gripes about it. And I remember feeling like you're sort of on a freight train towards the next encounter, which is going to be a strategic board game style encounter, and it's just like that's how the game is. And so I wanted to really move in the other direction with ShadowDark.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the page from the book for the Game Master, and the pact here is great. I think you and your players are gaming together to have fun, prop each other up, and strengthen bonds. This is the pact. And I really like your writing is concise and really to the point. And when I first heard about ShadowDark, it was, I think, maybe Ben or maybe, who's the Dungeon Master guy?
Professor Dungeon
Yeah.
Master? Yeah.
And so I went and checked it out, and it was really the writing that I think brought me to it. The rules are super simple, right? You know, you got one action, one move. And so we're playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and we're looking at what other game systems do we want to try out. So why did you go with the kind of the rules you picked, the action rules you picked, etc.?
Yeah, well, the primary set of goals were there were only a few, and I decided to like build from the ground up, and I wanted to use like the same scale of math as Basic Expert. But besides that, it was really building from the ground up. And so everything that I put into the rules, I tried to weigh against these kind of core pillars. And, you know, there are things like darkness has to always be scary, and inventory has to matter. And, you know, the things that the characters earn have to matter. Mundane gear has to always matter. And so when I was building the rules around that, I also had limited space. You know, the book is a digest size book, and I personally am the kind of I just have so little time to just dive into gigantic, really dense books. And I was like, you know what, this is about getting the information to the game master as efficiently as possible. And so that too was a really important element of the core design. It had to be the rules had to be explainable enough to be remembered or to make sense in the context of the other rules, and to really fit on a one-page spread, you know. And I guess it's a little bit of the Twitter effect, where it's like, if you can't say it in one tweet, maybe you're taking too long. So the same kind of idea with this book. And I think that worked out. In fact, it was the greatest challenge at times, was getting everything to fit within the space that it had, because it was so important to me to have the book be an easy reference that I actually I would change rules sometimes to make sure that they could fit in the layout. And I think that ended up improving the game overall by keeping things really direct and simple.
Yeah, definitely. So the magic system is different than a 5e person's used to. And I didn't know if I'd like it at the start, but it really is growing on me. You don't like roll to hit with your cantrips, but you have to roll to cast a spell, and then you might lose a spell. But you, what brought you to that form of rules for spells?
Oh, I had been playing Dungeon Crawl Classics a bit, and Index Card RPG, which are both two phenomenal games that use roll to cast. And, you know, even just one or two sessions in, and I was just taken with how exciting that made Magic, because one big element of ShadowDark, and one thing that I think is present in games like Dungeon Crawl Classics is that magic is most certainly not guaranteed, and outcomes in general are not guaranteed no matter what they are. So I wanted to bake that into the game, and so I did roll to cast. I definitely simplified it, I think, from the DCC implementation. Just because this game's about being a little bit more simple and digestible, I guess. But that really, in my opinion, is one of the highlights of the game, is having magic be uncertain, and have it be sort of a cost analysis of, do I want to risk losing the spell? Do I want to risk a possible mishap if I roll really badly? Which, thankfully, there's a luck subsystem in the game, so. I've seen some people say, like, there's a guaranteed 5% chance that you're going to doom yourself every time you cast a spell. And that's not taking into account the very important luck subsystem in the game. But it still introduces enough risk that people question, like, do I want to try for that high level spell? Like, do I have a luck token on hand where I know I could try to get past a bad result if that were to happen? So to me, that just added a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Well, and then late in the fight is when you don't have luck tokens left and you need that spell to work. That's when you're going to lose it. So it cured all that tension. Yeah.
Yeah. Tons
Yeah.
of
It brings lots of tension. So what were some, you came in the days of second edition, you played a lot in that. What were some of your favorite adventures in that first edition, second edition timeframe?
Oh my gosh. Well, we were so amateur that we weren't really playing a lot of the classics. Although my high school history teacher, so this is a longish story. I'll try to keep it succinct, but my mom was an English teacher at my local high school, and her teaching partner is this wonderful guy, Mr. Larson, who I had known growing up because my mom had been working with him for years. So he knew me and my family growing up, and he would occasionally run D&D games for us. And he used first edition rules actually, but he would run us through some of the classics, like we did B2 and we did the Caves of Chaos with him. And I remember just absolutely loving those adventures. So I know those weren't AD&D. We did either an adult was running a really good classic adventure for us, or we were trying to hack our way through second edition without any kind of organized information. We were just like making things up as we went. So any of the really good stuff that I got to play in was like a classic module that was run by a grown up. So yeah. Yep. Gosh,
let's talk about conventions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm just laughing about second edition. No idea what I was doing. No idea.
Are you going to have more of a presence at conventions? Are you going to have like some actually organized play at conventions where you get some more games going? What's your future plans there?
Oh yes, I would love to. I'm finally getting to attend more conventions now because I'm not, working on the book. It's done, and now I get to share it out with people. And so this year for sure, I get to go to North Texas RPG Con very soon, which I'm super excited about. I've always wanted to go to it and never could. So this year I'll be there. And I'm running a couple events, and so are a few other people that are ShadowDark related. I'm going to be at, I might actually get to go to Gen Con. I don't want to promise, but it looks like the possibility just opened up for me within the last 2 days. And so it's entirely possible I'll be at Gen Con. Without a strong plan. So hopefully I'll see you there. I'm really, really come lately to it. But that, and then Gamehole Con in the fall I'm gonna be at. And I have some friends who have already organized some events. And I think, I'm not super knowledgeable about how to set up a whole organized play type thing, but I want to do it. So I think it's gonna be a mixture of me working with friends who already are going to be attending these cons, and then figuring out some kind of support structure for them, like getting them materials or writing some con specific stuff. That would be super fun. I definitely want to do that.
On the same lines, tournament adventures. So tournaments are a lot of fun. Have you guys ever thought about doing something like that?
Oh yeah, that would be fascinating. I've thought about this because a lot of the elements of ShadowDark RPG could lend themselves really well to a tournament, like a tournament about you only have one torch, how far can you get? Things like that. Yeah, something playing to the time mechanics and limiting them in some way, I think that would be a really fun and different take on tournament style play, where it's it's got some factors to it that are a little different from what maybe people have seen before. I have to talk to people who are good at writing tournament modules. There's a really fantastic game designer named Sursa Victory, and
I was
he's
just
been
going to read that
writing
name up. Yeah.
yeah, I have. Oh my gosh, I have to show it because I'm so thrilled about it. He wrote this adventure that I just got. You can get it printed off, and this is the, I don't want to say it wrong, Shrine of the Jaguar Princess, and it's essentially a mega dungeon for Shadowdark. And Sursa is super well known for writing tournament style dungeons. And actually is like a contest winning dungeon designer. And so I would love to try to convince Sursa to write like a tournament specific style dungeon for Shadowdark. I don't think there's anyone better to do that than Sursa. So I've got to talk to him about that.
I'd have to agree. We played a lot of his adventures. Sometimes we'll get together with friends just for a weekend and play, whatever we can find. And his adventures are so thematic, so dark, so over the top. It'd be a perfect fit, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, got a question here from JP. How did you settle on the Ancestries in the book, and why half orcs versus orcs? I think it's half orcs in the book, right? Go ahead.
Yes, there are. I did half orcs because that was what was available during like the 3rd edition era when I really started playing a lot of D&D, and so it was really just kind of a callback to my own nostalgia. I thought I'm gonna put in the core ancestries of that era, and I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it limited to a certain small quantity, and the same is true for classes, because the game is not about building your character and optimizing your character with these certain choices. So I didn't want to like accidentally encourage that by providing a bazillion ancestry options and classes. It would kind of work against the idea that you're not here to tune your character. You're here to find out who they are. So that was the reason why I kept the choices pretty limited. I tried to kind of hit each corner of the iconic Ancestries verse, and perhaps most divisively, I included goblins because I think goblins are hilarious. And that's just me being weird, but I really love goblin characters. Totally not old school in any way, totally against the typical, but I had to do it. So that was my one thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
Another question for you. You talked about Source of Victory. What are some of your other favorite modern adventure designers?
Oh, geez. I mean, I'm like looking at my desk for examples. Like, I have all these things out. Well, gosh, what am I looking at? I think that there's some phenomenal designers working for Goodman Games. Like, I think Harley Stroh is so cool. I think Michael Curtis, who now works for Goodman Games, wrote the Stonehell Mega Dungeon. And it's just absolutely spectacular. Literally, the 2 books of it sit on my bedside table, and I just leaf through it when I have a time at night when I'm tired. Man, who else? There's, gosh, now I feel silly drawing a blank because there's so many people I could name. I feel like it's just like, I know that Hankrin Fernale over at Runehammer Games has always been such a wonderful adventure designer, in a sort of in the vein of, how can you make this something the players want to engage with? He doesn't do a lot of really intense dungeon design. He does like situation design and then supports it by writing kind of like scenes or events in that can happen based on what the characters do. So it's a really interesting way to approach adventure design, and I thought that was so cool. I think Gavin Norman over at Necrotic Gnome writes just spectacular old school style adventures. And of course, there's probably some like non-modern, I guess, designers that I could name too. So yeah, tons of people. Gosh, I'll have to come up with a comprehensive list even.
Another question here we got from, let's see, just a statement. Brad says, "Hi Kelsey, hi Tom. Tom, your last Citadel playthrough was my favorite to watch to grasp ShadowDark play. Thank you very much, Brad. It was a amazing adventure. The adventure is so good, and as a DM, you just kind of sit back and let the adventure happen. The players are driving the action, they're driving the confrontations, and that's so much different than a lot of what I've been running for the last 20 years, where it's like, oh, here's the story, make sure you go through it. It's like, here's the situation, you decide how you're going to go through it, which is great.
Good.
The Wandering Merchant appeared randomly in our campaign, and now our party has a well of many worlds. Nice.
Yes, that makes me super happy.
Scott Baker says, new in a good way,
Oh,
captures the
man.
feel of the old games, but so easy for folks to get into. Yeah. You make a character in like minutes. Like, here, let me just share this real quick. In my Roll20, see what's showing up. Yeah. So we played recently a Gauntlet adventure, which is an adventure where you go through 0-level characters, and we just set up some macros that are going to choose not to work right now. So I'll have to redo the API, reload the APIs. Do that real quick. While I'm doing that, let's go to the next question. Kelsey, can you explain the 10-eyed oracle?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the named monsters. That's the dude on the cover right here. Whoa. So it's so interesting. This was the first piece of art ever made for the book by this phenomenal artist named Lucas Corte. And I commissioned him to make this piece of art, kind of knowing but not really knowing that I wanted to write a book someday with that art in it. And it was me kind of testing the waters, being like, oh, well, I don't have any art or anything, but maybe I'll just get one piece commissioned. And it's what inspired the 10-eyed oracle and really the whole system and its tone and vibe. And he's a legally distinct beholder. But I wanted to have the legally distinct beholder be an iconic creature. I didn't want there to be a bunch. I wanted there to be one. And there's a long, at least in my headcanon, this creature has something to do with the formation of the actual arcane library, which is what my company's named after. And I don't want to tell people my actual headcanon about that, because I want them to come up with theirs on their own. I was a little vague about who he is in the book, but to me, he's one of the old, very important and very powerful beings that sort of shaped my own game world into what it currently is today. And he's on a few roll tables. Like, he's wandering around down there in the ShadowDark, and you might find him at some point. So yeah, I love him.
I love the adventures, how a lot of the adventures have like monsters that are just so overwhelmingly powerful. If you were to go fight them, that'd be the end of you. And that gives the players agency to decide, are they going to push? Are they going to run? Are they going to talk? And it gives players a lot more reason to talk, a lot more reason to make alliances. Yeah. So that's really a great part of the game. Okay. So I think I might have this working here. We'll see.
And like, Tom, you're a pro.
APIs restarted.
His Roll20 foo is amazing.
All right. So ShadowDark, you roll up your stats for your character, 3d6 in order. Might re-roll if there's no 14, if the DM's letting you do that. Pick your ancestry, pick your class. Then once you got that, there's just a few more rolls to go, and you got your character. You got your hit points, your talents. There might be just 1 or 2 talent rolls on the character class table. You can roll randomly a background, roll randomly your gold pieces, which is 2d6 times 5, and then pick a name or roll randomly a name, and you're done. That's your character. And I love how your character sheets basically fit into a Twitter post really well. They really do. And they're so fun to post about these characters. Like, we have one rogue in our party, Dave's character, who has 3 hit points. He's 3rd level with 3 hit points.
Wow.
He's had some bad luck. Good luck living this far. Bad luck rolling his hit points.
Yeah, you deserve a medal, Dave. Half the fun is seeing how long can I keep this guy alive. Like, that's actually a really fun part. Yeah.
Okay. Any date time yet for the live bard creation?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I think I do have it scheduled. I don't think it's next Sunday. It might be next Sunday, or else it's the following Sunday. So it's going to be really soon. I have to repost about that and make sure I have an announcement about it, but it's pretty soon.
And your live post or your live run through on the Ranger class was great to get like insight into what your thoughts are on game design and character design. And it's great how these characters and races capture like the essence of the class and the race. You do a really good job on that. So go check out the Ranger class design if you guys haven't already checked that out. I'll put a link in the description below. Also in the description below are all my links to all my playthroughs for all the ShadowDark things I played through, and my Roll20 like guide, like how I do the Roll20 stuff that I do in Discord. I mean,
super important
ShadowDark.
stuff. Yeah, that's like the comprehensive Roll20 guide. I get asked a lot about how to use this on Roll20, and I'm like, ask Tom. I don't know. Ask Tom.
Okay. Let's see. Here's some more questions. Seems that Classless ShadowDark might need a bigger inventory. I do not like the idea. So it'd be like a bigger change of talents, right? You'd have to have just the Classless talent list.
I think you would. Yeah. Somebody brought the idea up there's a Facebook group for ShadowDark. And I saw it there. And at first I was reading through it and I was like, like I'm always a little bit like, what do I think about this? And the more I read it, I was like, well, this is really interesting. You probably would need to expand the talent table, like maybe make it like a 3d6 bell curve table instead. Or create maybe trees or something so that people aren't totally unfocused. Because one of the things you need in the game is a lot of adventures are written assuming certain abilities on the parts of the characters. And so like if you don't have anybody who can do magic type stuff, you might be hindered by that. So I don't know. I figured out maybe a way to give each character a little bit more of a focus as time goes on, but it's still maybe randomized. I don't know. There's so many ways one could approach that, but I just remember thinking it was a fascinating thought experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like in the table where you have +1 to melee or range attacks, would be +1 to melee, ranged, or spell attacks.
Yeah.
Get a little bit more broader, choice of
exactly.
things.
Yeah, just allowing some choice within the role would be, that would be a way for someone to specialize.
Okay. CC Germain says the dice tell the story in ShadowDark. They certainly help the story evolve, right? I think the players tell the story, but there's going to be a lot of story aspects that the dice drive. And that's good. I mean, it's like, it lets the DM enjoy playing a lot too, because now they don't know how it's going to end.
That's a huge part. That's why when you're game mastering, personally, and you guys might feel this way too, let me know, but you don't want to know what's going to happen. You want to have fun too. If you know or are aiming the adventure in a certain direction, I mean, after a while, that gets a little bit like you're the only one who's not discovering what's happening, and it's not, I don't know, it's missing some joy.
Yeah. Here's an idea from Brad. At 9th level, let players choose their talent.
You could.
An optional option. Yeah.
Very true. Your last talent, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cursed scroll zines that you got, they're pretty neat. They're focused like on a theme, right? And they each have often a class in them. Are the classes intended to be used in the core rules-based adventures?
I think that always. Yes, but I think that those classes are definitely optional by nature. None of them are ever going to be as specialized in a particular role as a core class. So I honestly do think that the Cursed Scroll classes are a little bit of like the advanced options, or the options for people that want to play the game in slightly more hard mode, where they're maybe a more blended role. The only exception to this is probably the Witch class, which is in Cursed Scroll 1. They're just a full-out spellcaster that's focused on the charisma stat, which doesn't get a lot of love otherwise in any game. So they're definitely a stand on their own, kind of like they're almost a core class as far as their utility goes. Everybody else is more a fun thematic, like, try it out and see how this impacts your party dynamics and see what you can leverage from this class. It would be fun.
So you can get these Cursed Scroll zines through the Kickstarter, right? And you can still get through in the Kickstarter, right? It's like open for late backers.
Yeah, I have late backers, late pledges, and the PDF delivery is immediate for everything. So like all of the material is PDF ready, and I'm going to try to get the PDF stuff up on my website within the next week as well, for people who just want to go through that route. But yeah, it's all out there.
So how long until, have you reached a point with this where it's your day job, or how long until you think it will be your day job?
I have. It's definitely my day job now. I think that I need two of me because it's content creation is a big part of it. But right now I'm more focused on the supporting the Kickstarter and answering emails and getting the logistics set up. So it's, you know, it's a full-time commitment now.
So we had a comment. This is from a while back when we were talking about the spells, but so far in my games, the players are saving luck tokens to reroll natural ones on spellcasting checks. It's really
That's
a
a
good time
great
to use them.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
This
that's
is
a lot of people do.
this is a good question. So I had to just make a call on games I ran. The halfling invisibility should be treated the same as the spell invisibility, or should it be treated differently? In other words, does it end when they attack?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that it should be treated the same as the spell personally. But you know, this is probably the most divisive of the ancestry abilities because everyone was like, well, why didn't you just give halflings to show their sneakiness, like advantage on dexterity checks for sneaking and hiding? And that would actually make them the worst thieves because that's a class feature of thieves. So halflings would bring no inherent talent then to being a thief, and it would actually counterintuitively make them terrible thieves. Or rather, it would give them no additional benefit, so it de-incentivizes people from choosing thief. So this makes them really great thieves, in my opinion, and I think it's more of a supernatural ability on the part of the halfling. So I personally do not treat it as a spell exactly. I just let them be invisible for 3 rounds and do whatever mayhem you can. It's only 3 rounds and it's once a day. So get up to some
It's like
shenanigans in that very limited time.
It's like they're all walking around with a ring of power. The one ring.
Yeah, listen,
They all have the one ring.
It absolutely was a factor. Like that, like hobbits and the ring of power and like the halfling ability to hide under a log from like a ring wraith was a huge factor in this.
Dave says, I too have a 5% chance of doom in everything I do.
Yes, in real life, I have that.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to the Cursed Scroll zines. When can we expect issue number 4?
Oh, thank you. I love writing them. They're so fun. They're definitely like the core book was meant to be building blocks for people. And then the Cursed Scroll zines is where I just go wild putting in, you know, like hints at game world stuff and hex crawls and adventures and thematic stuff. And so I think I'll always be writing them. Number 4 is shaping up to probably be I'm probably going to print the Ranger and the Bard in there because folks do want it in hard copy. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to get that into print. And so themed around, you know, hex crawling and overland stuff. And that's probably what number 4 is going to be. It's taking shape.
How often are you going to release those? Do you know?
It usually takes me about 2 to 3 months to write each one. And I kind of work on them alongside other projects. You know, they need a little bit of time to bake. So I'm expecting to do maybe like 1 a quarter. And I don't want to put a super strict timeline on it because even 1 a quarter would be actually kind of a lot. I managed to get 3 of them written within the span of a year. So it's hard to put a timeline on them because sometimes it's me following a little bit of a muse, like something I get interested in and then go on a research bender and then want to create some thematic content centered around that. Hopefully about 3 a year, you know.
We have here Clayton Gill, Tom, thank you for your ShadowDark actual plays. Are you planning to do more? They will be most welcome. Yeah, definitely the ones that are in the other zines. Mm-hmm. And I want to do some Source of Victory ones because those are amazing. So look for more of those coming for sure. Let's see here. They don't grant a reroll like they do in well, that's the other one. Question Gen Con. Dave asked about Gen Con. Maybe, right, Kelsey? Might get to go to Gen Con this year.
Yeah, it looks like yes, but I always hate to say that and disappoint people. So it's once I know for sure, I'll make an announcement. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a ShadowDark interview without this question. What's with the hammers?
It's just if you know. No, you're asking to help people. I know the hammers has become such an inside joke. When I was originally playtesting the game, you know, it was in its beta form, and we were stress testing the inventory system where you can carry either 10 pieces of gear or a number equal to your strength score. And I mentioned earlier that one of the core design tenets of the game was making all gear matter, specifically because you can only carry so little of it. So I realized that after building out the gear list and kind of matching it to sort of classic, AD&D gear lists and pulling from that, I was like, we have 10 iron spikes and then you need a hammer. You have to carry a separate hammer to make them useful. And it bothered me because for a lot of characters, that's like 20% of their inventory space. And so, so I was like, oh, you know what? The iron spikes are really useful, but the hammer, let's just assume people have it or something, or they'll use the pommel on their longsword, or they'll use another spike to hammer these things in. So I just removed hammers from the inventory list. And then it became this giant joke, like hashtag like Hammergate and like where are the hammers and like because people thought it was so funny. I think that we turned it into a thing, and now there's jokes about there being no actual hammers in the game world, and if you find one, it's like a rare prize. And I put some hammer jokes in the core book. There's some Easter eggs about hammers in there that I hope people find.
Dave says GameHoleCon, yeah. And Dave says, if you set up a spot at either, I'll be there. I'll run a table. I think you'll have a lot of success getting people to run tables for you. So if you definitely decide to do, multiple games, if I make it, I'd be interested for sure.
Yes, and anyone who's listening, if you want to run a ShadowDark game at a convention, first of all, like please do like book whatever you want, and if you need any resources from me, please ask. Because I know there are the Cursed Scroll zines and Quick Start adventures are out there, but if there's something else that you need that would make it easier for you, like I want to help with that, so please let me know.
Jermaine says everyone has an inner goblin. I know John does for sure. John plays a lot of goblins and halflings.
I do like the goblin.
Yeah.
I played a goblin noble. My goblin noble was fun.
I love it. One of my favorite characters I've played was a goblin who was a refined gentleman. Yeah.
Mine was seventh in line to the throne, and there was a lot of fratricide with him and his siblings. And so every time I helped somebody else in combat, I would say, it's a good thing you're not my brother.
He played in Muggle Blub, so you can watch him in Muggle Blub. And he got an item there that can expunge someone. And so he was just holding that for one of his brothers.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Question. Are there any plans for animal companions? I've heard your take on this before, and I like it. So
thank you. I'm not totally taken by the idea of any form of companion being, whether it's like retainers and henchmen, which is kind of blasphemy if you're talking about old school D&D, but I think part of the reason behind why I don't love that is because it just really impacts the action economy, where what that is kind of how many actions each person or creature can take. So if like one player has themselves and an animal companion, or two people happen to have an animal companion, it can literally double the amount of rolls and actions you're planning, and it really slows the game down. So like a full out animal companion is not really something I'm planning. I guess I could see it would be challenging. I've tried to design things for retainers and companions that were sort of like passive rider benefits, but then it doesn't account for the fact that you have this other person or creature that could, if you're dying, could drag you away from the fire or something. It doesn't quite work. And so I think ultimately, at least from me, I don't have any strong plans to do stuff like that right now. Some third-party people have done some cool retainer type things and designs, which you should design it. People try to design it. You'd come up with something better than me.
I do like the idea of something passive. Having a companion that doesn't get actions but does something passive. That'd be interesting. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah. And we played D&D since 1979, and we never used henchmen. So I don't know what the whole fascination with old school and henchmen is, because it's just like, we don't have time for that,
They're
all those extra people. Yeah.
They're there to haul your gear and absorb damage, and I'm like, why don't we just design the game assuming that that's not necessary, and then make them a bit less necessary? Yeah.
John, If you have to go anytime, just let me know.
Yeah, I was about to say I do have to
Okay.
turn into a pumpkin, but it's been great meeting you, Kelsey, and I'm excited for everything you're doing.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John. It's
John.
wonderful to meet you.
All right. A couple more questions here from Dave. I'm running a Tower Gygax style game at a game day starting with 0 level characters. What would you suggest for a good 0 level dungeon?
Ooh, okay. I think that all Goodman Games writes really fun 0 level dungeons, and really anything that puts the characters right in the middle of a catastrophe. Like a lot of times 0 level dungeons have the characters in the dungeon trying to get out. And that's a really fun way to go. Stuff that has gear scattered around so they can start to augment themselves. And you know, like if you could probably run almost any. Actually, you could probably run a lot of low level adventures as a 0 level dungeon with some of those quick changes. Like put the characters already in the dungeon from the start. Try to remove anything that requires class abilities. Like if you need a thief who can pick locks, well, you're not going to have that yet in a 0 level dungeon. So maybe figure out a way to change that. But be generous with giving out gear, especially because gauntlet level characters will be dying left and right. And the whole point is to kind of for them to accumulate the stuff that they need from nothing. So ooh, look what we've got here.
Yeah, so Trial of the Slime Lord, I ran that a couple times. You can find that link in the description below. It is too strong, probably, as written, because both times I ran it, it's been TPKs. So you might tone it down a little bit in some locations, but it was a really fun one. I think in Cursed Scroll 3 you have one, right?
I do,
The Midnight
yeah, I
Sun one?
do. It is, and it's that one's meant to be. It's actually kind of meant to simulate an ordinary dungeon delve, but have those subtle factors baked in where, you know, you're in there to get gear. Like you come in without gear, and you're not really going to be hindered by not having class abilities like locked doors that you couldn't get through.
All right. Next one we have is from Brad. Kelsey ShadowDark reinvigorated my GMing and excited my gaming group. I have no idea how my players would react with it being such a simple system, but they're loving it. So that's great. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. That makes me very happy to hear. Thank you.
Can you talk about Owlbear Rodeo? Do you use it for any particular reason?
Oh yeah, Owlbear Rodeo is a virtual tabletop. It's a really simple one, which is basically why I use it because I am a simple lady. But it's really just like a map with tokens and dice rolling. And I mean, for me, that the simplicity is really beneficial, but also because when I run online games, which I certainly don't do as much as Tom, I have like a minimal level of expertise. But when I do, I'm mostly just trying to simulate like the at table experience, and um, I don't really have the knowledge to try to take advantage of all of the wonderful things Roll20 can give you. Like you know, like dynamic lighting, for example. Tom used that to enormous effect in his games. And it's beyond my skill level, so I don't do it myself. So then I use Owlbear Rodeo as a good like actual at the table simulation. And their Owlbear Rodeo, I think, has a 2.0 version that's out or in beta that includes things like dynamic lighting or add-ons, but I'm just a simple person at heart.
All right, then what's next? Big Book of Dungeon Design, Space Horror, Cursed Scroll Hardback Annual.
This is a great question. I think of there's definitely some curse scrolls in the works. They're always kind of a side project while I'm doing other things. But I really want to write a larger dungeon now, like a themed dungeon that really leans into the tenets of Shadowdark. And I think it's going to need to include like a town, like a connected home base type thing that's fully developed out too. So, in my opinion, that's going to be the next thing. I'm kind of envisioning it as sort of a box set thing where you have just a nice, really big dungeon and surrounding area resources to just run like a longer campaign out of.
Like Keep on the Shadowdark.
Yes. Caverns and Shadowdark. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. We got Shadowdark is the easiest to master and DM. Yeah. Dead simple rules, super well written, concise but clear, and you can just get into playing immediately. You can teach someone how to play it in no time, you know, everything. I've played a lot of 5th edition, so it's basically what basic 5th edition should look like. You know, you take all the basic skills, you take out all the extra bonus actions and extra, stuff like that that doesn't contribute. Now, people have asked me, well, I can only do one thing. That's, what if I want to do other things? I'm like, well, your turn's going to come around in like 10 more seconds. Just
Mhm.
wait for your next turn. It's going to come so fast.
Yeah,
And it
that's the
really
trade-off.
speeds up gameplay. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Mhm.
Let's see here. Any more? Yeah, question. What is the status? Not sure if I know the answer to this. What is the status of the limited use license? Can we discuss it here?
Oh, I mean, sure. If folks want to talk about it, I have a ShadowDark RPG. It's like a third-party license. The OGL is still in flux. People are still writing legal responses to it and licenses that hopefully fill its gap now. But I have a license that basically just turns half the book into a systems reference document. So like you can reprint like verbatim any monster, spell, or now magic item in the book. I actually just expanded that to include magic items because it wasn't clear that it did. And I'm like, yes, it includes magic items. So you can reprint all that. And the only thing you would need to do is to put a tiny statement at the front of your document saying like, it's like boilerplate. Like this is an original work. It's not affiliated with the Arcane Library. It's just like legal boilerplate. And that, as far as like writing and publishing material, covers a ton of bases. But people, still rightly so, have a lot of questions, and even legal documents need to be interpreted and debated. And so we're going to be doing an AMA with the head of the legal team who helped write this document. He's my lawyer, Greg the lawyer. And we're doing an AMA, I think, in a couple. I'm always like, when did I schedule something? It's an upcoming Sunday in the near future. And the purpose is to answer questions, because I've always been amazed by the lack of like explanation and transparency around the OGL. Like Wizards had very little forward-facing resources in plain language about like, here's how you actually use this and here's what this actually means. And yeah, I don't want to be like that. I want people to feel like comfortable and not scared and reassured about using this license. And so like that's the whole point behind these kinds of things we're doing.
Here's one.
Yeah.
Not familiar with Dead Alewives, but I love the Dead Alewives Easter eggs. Great work.
Oh, okay. Man, do I even know what those are? The Dead Alewives? I now have to like look back and see if
I
I
have to,
have
yeah.
to look back and
I
yeah.
love that goblins are actually playable in ShadowDark.
Yay.
Is there a level of adventure quest for the goblin who took the hammers?
Yes, the ultimate hammer. Who took the world hammer? Why are they gone?
All right. Well, we could go on and on and on, but thank you very much, Kelsey, for being on. And
Thank
I
you,
look
Bob.
forward to playing more ShadowDark. If you have any questions about Roll20 stuff, hit me up anytime. And if you're going to any conventions, hit me up anytime. I'd
Awesome.
love to connect more in the future, and hope you have a very successful future in ShadowDark. Any last
Thank
things you want to share with people watching?
Gosh, just you can check out my stuff on the arcanelibrary.com or just type that into Google. And then yeah, I hope to see you all at conventions too. Tom, I hope to see you at some conventions. We got to cross paths.
Definitely.
And I am so grateful for the high quality live plays you're doing and just the beautiful demonstration of the game and its true intent. You do a fantastic job. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for watching. Look for more ShadowDark games coming soon.